How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we send Daf Lamed Tes, Daf 39 of masechta Avodah Zarah, friends. Today we are going to wrap up the mishnah that we have been learning for the past few days. I reckon, I can't remember when we started it, so I guess it must have been a few days. We're going to wrap up that mishnah. Remember, the mishnah talks about things that are usher to eat, but mutter to get hana'ah from, belonging to ovday kokhavim, non-Jews, right? So foods belonging to non-Jews that is permitted to get benefit from, but forbidden to eat. We're going to wrap that up. And then get to the next mishnah, which talks about foods of ovday kokhavim that it is not only permitted to get benefit from, but it is also permitted to actually eat them. So we're going to get to that mishnah towards the end of today's daf. So without further ado, we are going to jump straight in. We are going to start all the way at the bottom of daf Lamed Ches Amid Beis, 3 lines from the bottom, where it says Uchvashin shedarkon loses b'sochan yain. Ooh. Now that's exciting stuff. Kvashim, I'd imagine they're like pickles, preserves. The heck is a preserve? I'm going to go with pickle, all right? How's that? Any objections? Pickle. So pickles that normally they would put wine into the brine, into the pickling solution. So if they would put wine into that solution, so then it would be also b'achila, but mutter bano. Says the Gemara, this halach is only when they normally put wine into it. But what if you know 100% that there is wine in this brine? Also afilu bano, then it would be also in bano. So if you don't actually know fact that there's wine in the brine, but there probably is. What did he say? He says, "Where are we? Shedarkon." It's their general practice that there would be wine. You can't say for sure that there is wine in this specific batch. So in that case, it's mutar bano. But if you do know that there is definitely wine of an ovday kokhavim in this brine, aser bano. Umayshno mi muryis. If you remember from, I think this was probably 2 mishnahs ago, that when it comes to muryis, which also has wine in it, there the chachamim had said that it is mutar bano. There by the muryis, the chachamim had said it's mutar bano. Reb Meir had said it's also bano. And the chachamim said that it is mutar bano. Why would the muryis be mutar bano? But here Chizkiah is saying that if you know that there's wine in the brine, that it would be aser bano. The answer is Hasam over there. Lavui zuama. By the muryis, the role of the wine is simply the muryis has a milchig geschmeck. It has a milchig geschmeck. It smells bad, and the wine is to cancel out the milchig geschmeck. Hacha, but over here by the pickles, the matuke taima, the wine is actually coming to sweeten it up. And therefore, if you know for sure that there's wine in the brine, so then also even bano. Reb Yochanan Amos is Reb Yochanan afilu biyadua nami mutter, says Reb Yochanan argues with Chizkiah, and his opinion is that even if you know that there is wine in the brine, nami mutter, it's still mutter ba'ano'ah. Mashnami muryis l'Reb Meir. Now, why should this be different than muryis according to Reb Meir, where he had said to aser ba'ano'ah, right? By muryis, Reb Meir had said aser ba'ano'ah. I wonder if part of the question here is like, then if that's the case, then why by muryis would Reb Meir have argued in saying that it's aser ba'ano'ah, but he doesn't do that over here? I don't know. Anyways, but Rabbi Yochanan is saying that even if you know that for sure there is wine in the brine, it's mutar ba'hano'ah, also b'achila, but mutar ba'hano'ah. The question is, by muryis, Reb Meir had said that it is osir even bahana'a. Why would Morius have been different than here? So Hasam over there, Yadia Mamasha. The thing is, by Morius, you actually eat the Morius. And you actually eat the Morius, and the wine is part of the Morius. It's some kind of a dip. But over here, when it comes to pickles, you pull, let's say we're talking about a classic cucumber pickle. So you pull the pickle out of the brine. You're not drinking the brine, you eat the pickle, and you leave the brine. So since by Morius, the wine was more integral, played a larger role in the dip, in that Morius fish fat dip. So because the wine was more important there, you actually consumed the wine, so therefore it's also even bano. Rameir said it's also even bano, but over here, by the brine, by the pickles, the pickling solution is not consumed. It is the pickles that are consumed, and the wine and everything else would have been left behind. So therefore, that's why we don't go so far as to say that it's asur ba'anoah, according to Reb Yochanan. V'taris trufa v'tzir she'ein ba'dag v'chulei. The Mishnah talked about a taris. A taris is a type of small fish, I believe, that is kosher. The thing is, if it's all mixed up, it's all, you can't identify it as such. You can't identify it as a taris because it got all mixed around. V'tzir she'ein ba'daga, or some kind of a fish brine that doesn't have that. What was the kind of fish that would swim around in the kosher fish brine? V'taris trufa v'tzir she'ein ba'daga kilbis shotetesbo. A kilbis fish, apparently, when it came to fish brine, if the brine was from a kosher fish, so if the brine was from a kosher fish, there would inevitably be this kilbis fish swimming around in there. And okay, so therefore, so what do we say? So we said, so if the brine doesn't have the kilbis fish, so then it must be tummy fish brine. My chilak. Now, what is a chilak fish? We've talked about this chilak fish. So let's actually let's hear what the Gemara has to say about the chilak fish. It is a sultanis fish. Asura. Why is it forbidden? Because other fish get mixed together with it. Let me just look at something. Yeah. Let's go weiter. Let's just go weiter for a little bit more, and then we'll get back to the chilak. A fish that doesn't currently have fins and scales, but it will grow fins and scales as it develops. Kigon ha-sultanis, for example, the sultanis, which is the chilak, v'ha'ofitz, and the ofitz fish, mutter, these fish are permitted. Similarly, if a fish currently has fins and scales, but is going to shed them in the future, when the fish comes out of rises from the sea, kigon akunis, the akunis, or what if we say the akuns? I feel like that is I prefer that, even though it's probably not right, but the akuns, whatever, the akunis, I guess, or the afunis, maybe it is akuns. I have no clue. Have you ever eaten an akunis fish? Maybe, is there an akuns fish, an akunis fish? Ich weiß nicht, afunis? Katisvitiis, v'achastafiis, v'atunis, akunis and atunis and afunis. Okay, you getting the akunis, the afunis, or the atunis? Oh gosh, they must have mixed up that order all the time. I can almost say, what? This is an akunis fish. I ordered an atunis fish. I thought you said akunis. Mutter. They're allowed if it has fins and scales and they're going to be shed, or it doesn't have fins and scales and it's going to grow. It is mutter. Now, getting back to the chilak. So chilak, we've seen it before. Chilak is this small fish that initially, when it's born, does not have fins and scales, but it develops fins and scales, and it is a kosher fish. The concern with chilak is that it's sold, my understanding is it's kind of like sardines or something. You don't just buy one sardine, you buy a bag full of sardines. And in that bag full, in that mixture may be, or will likely be, non-kosher fish mixed in there as well. And that is why we would not eat it, though we did see a few days ago that if it's from an expert fisherman, well, then then the chilak would be okay, because the expert fisherman will make sure that there's only chilak in there and nothing else, because the other fish don't taste very good. Okay. Achuz Rababo b'Kesari. Rababo announced in Caesarea. I don't think I've ever been to Caesarea. Kirve dogim ve'ubron, the fatty intestines of a fish, and I think the ubron is the fish eggs. Okay, we're gonna go with that. Cool. Nikhin mikol adam can be purchased from any fishmonger in Caesarea. Chezgosen einan boin elo mi piluso ve'aspamio, because the assumption in Caesarea is that all of the fish are coming from either pilusa or aspamia, and in those places, all the fish coming from there are kosher fish, and therefore any of the fatty intestines or fish eggs from any of the fish in Caesarea, they're all kosher. Kyodam Abai, like that which Abai says, Hait Tzachanto de Bav Naira, this Tzachanto, which I believe is the chilak, I think Rashi says the chilak of the river Bab. That sounds like a nice river, the Bab River. Does anybody live near a Bab River? That's a great name for a river. The Bab River. That's genius. Name of river Bab. What a great idea. Sharia, the Bab River, the chilak from the Bab River are permitted. My time, how come? If it's because the Bab River is a starker river, the water really flows stark on the Bab River. Dog tome and the tome fish came the leisle chud ashedra, because they are spineless, and would be unable to survive in such a strong current like the Bab current, because they are spineless. But that can't be the case, because we do see that tome fish would be able to survive in such a environment. Ella, mishum dimliche mai, it's because the Bab River's waters are very salty. Vaidog tome, and this impure fish came in the lace lake kalfe, because they lack scales. Beduchta dimliche mai lemotzi koi, would be unable, a scaleless fish would be unable to survive in such a salty environment. V'ako chazinan dekoi, but once again we see that these scaleless fish do succeed to survive in salty environments. The reason is simply that I believe that the riverbed of the Bab River simply does not support these tomate fish, and therefore there are none in the Bab River. However, nowadays, however, but nowadays, interesting how this was, who had made this? This was Abaye, right? I believe it was Abaye. That Abaye is right. Abaye said Tzachanta de Bab Nara. Ravina was probably maybe 2 generations after Abaye, and Abaye was saying all the fish in the river Bab are kosher. 2 generations later already, Ravina was saying things have changed. Now where am I? Now the Goza River and the Gamda River empty out into the Bab River, and now who knows what fish are there. Interesting how 1,500 years ago things were changing, and assumptions that were able to be made about certain rivers change over time back then as well. Omar Abaye says, boye. The sea donkey. I think there's something called a seahorse, right? The seahorse. There's a sea donkey, shari, and it's kosher. Torah diomama, there's a sea ox, osir, and it's treif. V'simonet, and the sign is, the way to remember which is which, tame, Torah, tame, that the donkey, which is normally tame, in the sea, it's tahor, and the shore, which is normally tahor, in the sea, is tame. Omar Rav Ashi says, Rav Ashi, shvarnuna, shari, says Rav Ashi that the shvarnuna fish is permitted. Kdash nuna, also, but the kdash nuna is also b'simonach, and the way to remember this is Kodesh LaHashem. that Kadash is like Kodesh, is like Kodshim, Kodesh Lashem, right? Kodshim are Osir Ba'ano. Yikadam, those say, Kever, Kvar Nuna, Osir, V'simanach, Kivrei ovday kokhavim. That the Kvar Nuna fish is also, and the way to remember that is Kivrei ovday kokhavim. Those are also, I guess, I don't know, I guess if it's Kivrei ovday kokhavim, is stay away, I guess, even though they're probably not metami, but without getting, I don't know, I guess the vibe is like, stay away. Rabbi Akiva ikla leginzik. Once again, Rabbi Akiva visited Ginzak. I saw the Kame, Hahu Nuna, and they brought before him a fish. Tavadomi lechipusha, and it was like a chipusha. Chipusha, I think, is a non-kosher fish. Yeah, Rashi says dog tomid. So what did he do? Chafre b'dikule, he took a basket and started like moving it around on this chipusha fish, or the supposed chipusha fish. Chozebe kalfe, and what did he see? He saw that on the basket were scales. Scales were coming off of this fish. Bishari. So Rabbi Akiva says, oh, it's clearly not a chipusha fish. It's a kosher fish. And everybody cheered. Hip, hip. Hooray. Rav Ashi ikla le Tadmoria. Rav Ashi visited Tadmoria. I saw the Kami Au Nuna, and they brought before him a fish. And this fish was very similar to a tzlufcha. Yoma, and of Ashi, I think maybe the point is that the tzlufcha is tamei. I don't know. Anyways, whatever it was, he took this fish and he lifted it up to the sun, Chaza, and he saw the avabeit simche, and he saw that there were scales. He said, all right, it's a kosher fish. Of Ashi ikla lau asra. Rav Ashi visited a certain place. I saw the comment they brought before him. Nuna dabi domi l'shfarnuna. He saw a fish that was similar to shfarnuna, which we had said earlier was a kosher fish. I think, right? Did we not say that? I think we had said that. Shfarnuna, right? Amar Rav Ashi shfarnuna shari. Okay. So chafye b'meshichle, he covered it, I think, in like a chivar, in like a white bowl or something. Chazave kalfe, and he saw that there were scales. V'shari, he says, okay, well, it's a kosher fish. Rabbi Bachana ikla le'akra da'agma. Rabbi Bachana visited Akra da'agma, krivule, they brought to him tzachanto. Shami la'hu, gavid avakorile bote. So they brought for him tzachanta, which I think we had said, yeah, is chilak, which is kosher, but he heard somebody was calling it, what was he calling it? Bote. Well, since this guy is calling this fish bote, shmamina, dover tome isbe, there must be something tummy about this fish. I guess bote is a tummy fish. Yeah, what is Hashem? Vihu shem dog tummy. Yeah, it's a tummy fish. So Rav Ashi is like, no, Rabbi Bachana, right? He's like, something seems shady about this fish. So I mean, the kokhavim bate shmamina dvar tummy is there's something tummy about this fish. Lo ochal mine, he did not eat it. Litzafra, and the next morning, he analyzed, he looked into, he researched the matter, hashkach bei davar tummy, and he found something tummy in the fish. Kori Anafshi, and Rabbi Bachana said about himself, Lo Yeuna, the tzaddik kol oven, that nothing iniquitous, nothing bad will happen to a righteous man. V'akoret shel chilotis, and a grain of a chilotis. Chilotis was a very sharp something or other. My time, how come this grain of a chilotis is not allowed to be eaten, mutar bano, but also b'achila? My time, mishum de mafsike le b'sakina. Well, because they are going to cut the chilatis with a knife, right? The kokhavim is going to cut the chilatis with a knife. Afagav the amar nosin tam lefgam mutar. And even though we had said that nosin tam lefgam is mutar, nonetheless, agav chorfe, because the chilatis the chiltis is so sharp. Chorfe de chiltisa. Machalya le shamnunisa. So any, I guess, fats, tamei fats that may have been associated with the knife used to cut the chiltis will be sweetened by the sharpness of the chiltis, v'avale kinosin tam l'shvach, and it'll be as though whatever flavors are emanating or osmosising from the knife, the ovday kokhavim's knife, those flavors normally would be negative, they would be pagam, but because of the sharp interaction with them, it has the result of sweetening them, and those flavors are ending up actually providing a sweet and a pleasant flavor, and therefore it's nosin tam l'shvach, providing flavor, positive flavor, ve'oser. and therefore it's osir. Other Reb Levi, Havakom Zabin Chiltisa, the servant of Levi was selling Chiltisa, was selling this sharp plant thingy. Kinochnavshe de Reb Levi, when Reb Levi passed away, also the Kame de Reb Yechon, they came for Reb Yechon and Omerlin, they said to Reb Yechon, Ma'u the Mizabin Mina, can we continue to purchase Chiltis from Levi's Eved? I guess when Levi was alive, so the assumption was that the Chiltis that Levi's Eved was selling was kosher Chiltis. He wasn't using any tummy stuff. The shal is, now that Levi's gestorben, now that Levi's dead, can we still trust that his Eved is going to sell kosher Chiltis? Omelahu, and Rabbi Yechanan says to them, Avdu shel chover, hareu ki chover. The Eved of a chover, of a trustworthy person, trustworthy for trumis and for, what was the other example that I think Rashi Taka says a little bit later, that they will eat impurity, and that they will separate trumas and maisus, etc. So the Eved of a chaver, of a person who's trusted for these things, the Eved is like the chaver and he is trustworthy as well. Rafuna bar man Yomi, so in Tchelta me anshe devese de Rav Amram, Rav Huna bar man Yomi purchased tcheles from Rav Amram Chasida's wife. Now, possibly widow, I don't know. Now, tcheles, the idea was that it was an expensive item, as we're going to see also a little bit later at the bottom of the Amud, that tcheles was an expensive item, and therefore there are questions about its authenticity. And the question is, if buying it from Rav Amram Chasida's wife, can we trust that whatever checks and proper things had to be done to ascertain the authenticity and the validity of the tcheles, can we assume that it's kosher? Tcheles also the comment of Yosef. So Rav Huna bar man Yomi came to Rav Yosef to ask him, La'av b'yada, and Rav Yosef didn't know the answer, if he could trust and buy the tcheles from Rav Amram Chasida's wife. Pogabei chonon chayota, and fate would have it that Rav Huna bar man Yomi bumped into Chonon the tailor, Omalei Yosef Anya Manole, and Chonon the tailor says, how would poor Yosef know the answer to tcheles, which is an expensive thing? My initial gut is to say that this means that Rav Yosef was poor. Is that the idea? Was Rav Yosef poor? I can't think of any indication that he was wealthy. Interesting. Meaning it sounds like the vibe of the statement is like, well, Rav Yosef is poor, how would he know about expensive things like tcheles? Bedidi Abba Ovda, however, says Chonon Chayta, maybe Chonon Chayta, that there was once an incident with me, the Zabini Tchelta, Manche Dvise de Ravna, that I bought tcheles from the wife of Ravna, Achua de Reb Chia bar Abba, I guess Ravna was, it sounds like Ravna was the brother of Rav Chia bar Abba. The Asoy lekame the Rav Masna, and I came before Rav Masna lo Av B'yoda, and he did not know, if I can assume, the kosherness of the tcheles. Asoy lekame to Rav Yehuda mi Hagronia. I then came to Rav Yehuda from Hagronia Omerli, and he said to me, Nafalt liyad. It's kind of a funny thing to say. Rav Yehuda mi Hagronia said, well, you fell into my clasp. You are dependent on me. That's kind of a funny thing to say. And this is what Shmuel said, that the wife of a chaver, so in this case the wife of Ravna, would be considered a chaver as well, and she's trustworthy, and I think the point is that you can assume that the tcheles is legit. The Tanarban, the Rabbi Stan Brisa, Eishes chaver arei kechaver, the wife of a chaver is considered like a chaver. Avdo shel chaver arei kechaver, the eved of a chaver, the servant of a chaver, is treated like a chaver. Chaver shemes, a chaver who dies, ishto uvanu uvnei bano uvnei beso, his wife, his children, the other people in his household. I wonder if that's a reference to avodim. I'm kind of assuming it is avodim and shvachos. Harei hein b'chezkason, they keep their chazaka. Right? We had said, for example, the eved of a chaver is a chaver. So they even after the chaver dies, everybody in his household maintain their chazaka, their chezkas kashrus, their chezkas chaver, until there's any reason to suspect it. right? Innocent until proven guilty kind of thing, right? When they were a chaver, if they were considered a chaver when the chaver was alive, right, their father or spouse or whatever, then they maintain that status until there's some reason to revoke it. V'chein, chotzer shemocher b'tcheles, also a chotzer, a courtyard in which they sell tcheles. Of course, tcheles is the tcheles dye that they would use for tzitzis. Hare, what is the note here? Hare hi b'chezkasa, it maintains its chezkas kashrus ad shetipasel until there's some reason to revoke it. The wife of an Ama Oretz, who then goes on to marry a chaver. And similarly, Bito shel Ama Oretz, the daughter of an Ama Oretz, shenises l'chaver, who married a chaver. Avdei shel Ama Oretz, the eved of an Ama Oretz, shenimkor l'chaver, who was sold to a chaver. Kulan tzrichin l'kabel divrei chavros, they have to accept upon themselves chavros, that they are going to, as Rashi says, eat in tahara. We talked about that, by the way, the other day. Right? Where do we see that? Right. When it came to shemen of an ovid kokhavim, Shmuel's initial explanation for the gezerah was zlifason shel. Was it zlifason shel tuma v'tamasim or something? Zlifason shel kelim tmeim osartim. The fact that they were in kelim tmeim, and the Gemara asks, well, is everybody makbid to always be tahor? So we see, and I think I'd mentioned that it's considered a preference, right? It's considered better, something preferred to be somebody who always eats tahor things. So we see here as well, to be considered a chaver, what did we say? Rashi says, sheyochlu b'tahar, to make sure that you're eating things that are tahor. So anyways, if you have somebody who is, let's say, married to an Am Haaretz, and then they get married to a chaver, in order to have that status of being this a chaver, so they have to accept upon themselves these things, like to only eat b'tahara and to be makbid on trumas and maisus and things like that. Avol, however, eshes chaver, the wife of a chaver, shenises Am Haaretz, who then married an Am Haaretz, v'chein bito shel chaver, the daughter of a chaver, shenises Am Haaretz, who then married an Am Haaretz, v'chein avday shel chaver, the eved of a chaver shenimkar l'Am Haaretz, who was sold to an Am Haaretz, einon tzrichin l'kabel divrei chavos l'chatchila divrei Meir. Meir says that they do not need to accept chavros upon themselves once again, kind of like we were saying earlier, that once, they are considered a chaver, they maintain that chavros until they lose it for some reason. But I mean, I can understand why marrying a chaver, for example, an Am Haaretz, could be reasons to question it. But anyways, Reb Meir says that they maintain their chaver status. They maintain their chaver status and do not need to re-accept chavros upon themselves. Reb Yehuda Omer says, Reb Yehuda, afein tzrichin l'kabel divrei chavos l'chatchila. No, they do. Right? If you have, let's say, the wife of a chaver who then married an Am Haaretz, she would have to pledge her chavros. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer, similarly, Reb Shimon ben Elazar would say, Maisa b'isha achas, there's a maisa with a woman, shenises l'chaver, who is married to a chaver, v'aiso kosheres l'tefillin al yado. And so long as she was married to the chaver, she was doing holy things like wrapping tefillin on his arm. Nises l'moches, but then after the chaver, she was married to a tax collector. Tax collectors, I think, have a reputation of being ganifs, of being thieves. What does Rashi say? Oh, okay. Moches, stoma gazla. By default, they're ganifs. And what was she doing then when she was married to a moches? She was involved in moches stuff. When she was married to the chaver, she was doing chaver stuff. When she was married to the moches, she was doing moches stuff. So therefore, that supports the notion that even though she was married to a chaver initially, if she then is married to an Am Haaretz, in order to maintain her chaver status, she would have to re-pledge her allegiance to chaver, to the chaver crew. Amar Rav says, Rav chovis. Also, b'chos mechod, champad mut b'chos mechod. This is talking about Reuven, who's sending items to Shimon by way of a messenger who's a ovid kokhavim. So the shayla is, depending on what is being sent, the question is, how do we have to worry about being tampered with? So for example, so let's see. So he says, so chavis, which as we're going to see in a second stands for chalav basar yain tcheles, also b'chos mechel. So for example, wine, which is one of those items, if if Reuven is sending wine to Shimon using a messenger who is an oved kokhavim, one chosim, what does he say? He says one seal would be insufficient. One seal would be insufficient. It would have to be more than that at least. Whether it's a double seal, we talked about this the other day. But anyways, one seal would be insufficient. But champag, for champag, one seal is sufficient. Now, chalav, right? Chavis, which is an acronym for chalav, milk, basar, meat, yayin, wine, treles, and treles. The treles dye. Those are things that one seal would be insufficient. Asurin b'chosem echad. One seal is insufficient. Chiltis, however, when it comes to chiltis, right, champag, which is chiltis, morius, pas, gvina, mutarin b'chosem echad, one seal is sufficient for them. Pas lemai nechush. Now, we say that one seal is sufficient for bread because, after all, what is the concern? It's possible that, Taka, this can even be a question like, why does pas need to be even listed at all? Because we're going to see later on that Shmuel actually doesn't list pas, I think because it's just obvious. But anyways, whether it's obvious and it could be removed, or whether it's explaining why one seal is enough. Pas lemai nechush, what is the concern about bread? Right, Rashi also has like a different gear, so where things are moved around. But so let's just read it one way or another. I don't think it makes a huge difference. The concept is all the same. Pas lemai nechush, what is the concern when it comes to bread? Because if we just take a step back for a second, what is this concern here? Bichlal. Reuven is sending something to Shimon, and by way of a messenger who is an oved kokhavim, and there is one seal on it. So it's not like there's no seal on it. There is a seal on it, so that when Shimon receives it, he could check the seal to make sure it's valid, right? You go to the supermarket, you buy milk, you buy whatever you buy. Today I opened up a jar of trina. There's that plastic wrap around it, a seal. If that seal was broken, there's no way I would have used it. Taka, a few weeks ago, I came home with the trina, and actually the seal was completely open. I went back to the store and swapped it. Anyways, so yeah, of course, so there is a seal, right? And so let's say sending trina. Okay, how about this? Reuven is sending trina to Shimon. Okay, and the trina has a seal on it, and the messenger is like, oh, I'm hungry. So what would he have to do? So he's like, okay, I'm going to eat the trina. So he goes and he breaks the seal. Now, if Shimon gets this trina and he opens it up, and the plastic cover, right, the seal that you have to like pull off, is already pulled off, Shimon's going to be like, okay, there's something wrong with this. Which means that the shaliach, the messenger, if he wants to consume this trina, he would have to like open up the seal, eat the trina, and then figure out how to reseal it so that when Shimon gets it, he won't notice that it was even tampered with. So like that's a lot of effort. Okay, so like this is kind of part of the idea over here, is that Reuven is sending something to Shimon by way of this messenger, and it's sealed. The question is one seal enough? We're saying for bread, one seal is enough. We're saying that for bread, one seal is enough. Now, why shouldn't it be enough? What is the concern? Right? Obviously, you're going to want to have some kind of a seal on the bread, but one seal would be enough, because if we're concerned, well, the oved kokhavim might swap the bread, right? Maybe the oved kokhavim wants that bread, so he will swap it for a different bread. The thing is, why would the oved kokhavim want that particular bread? It must be because that particular bread that was being sent was fresh, and the oved kokhavim only had bread that was stale. But if he swaps a fresh bread for a stale bread, Shimon's going to get it, and he's going to be like, this is stale. This is messed up, right? Wait a minute. If he's going to swap out fresh bread for stale bread, Shimon's going to know that the bread that he received is stale. If he was expecting wheat bread and he swapped it out for barley bread, Nami also made a yediyah. Shimon is also going to realize that he did not receive what he expected. Iki adode, and if the breads are essentially the same, well then it's not worth the effort. Right? If the kokhavim has his own bread, it won't be worth the effort of breaking the seal and then having the problem of figuring out how to reseal it perfectly so that Shimon doesn't notice. It just simply won't be worth the effort for a loaf of bread. V'Rav, now when it comes to Rav, Ma'ishna gvina delo tarich u'mezayiv, cholav nami lo tarich u'mezayiv. Now, Rav had listed cheese on his list of things that one seal is sufficient, and milk was on his list of things that one seal is insufficient. So the question is, why is milk so different than cheese? Right? We're saying cheese, one seal is enough. It won't be worth his effort to get into that cheese. Why would milk be that much more stringent? So again, V'Rab Ma'ishna Gvina de Lo Tarich U'Mezayiv. How come when it comes to cheese, we say that one seal is enough, and the kokhavim, it won't be worth his while to figure out how to reseal it and stuff just for some cheese? Cholav nami lo tarich u'mezayiv. We should say the same thing for milk. Rav Kahana says, Rav Kahana, afik cholav v'ayil chatichas dog she'em bo simin. Rav Kahana says, you're taka right. Therefore, in the list of things that one seal is insufficient for, remove milk, because one seal is sufficient for milk, and instead replace milk with fish. Fish that doesn't have any kind of special sign on it that Shimon would be expecting. So basically a piece of fish, one seal would be insufficient. Hainu basar, but isn't fish the same thing as meat in principle? Tregavne basar, two types of meat. Fish meat, meat. Ushmuel omer, bayis aser b'chosem echad, mochig muter b'chosem echad, whereas Shmuel simply drops chalav from chavis and he just has bayis and he doesn't replace it with fish, and he has and champag is simply machag, he gets rid of pas from there, because as we said earlier, I think maybe I alluded to earlier, I don't know if I said explicitly, but basically Shmuel felt that you really didn't need bread on there at all. It's just so obvious, because as we said earlier, like what's actually the concern? So again, so Shmuel Amar says, Shmuel, bayis also b'chosem echod, that those three items, one seal is insufficient. Machag, muter b'chosem echod, machag, one seal is sufficient. Basar, yayin, tcheles bayis, which is meat, wine, and tcheles asurin b'chosem echad, whereas murias, chiltis, gvina, mutarin b'chosem echad. The Shmuel chatichas dog, shem bo simin, hainu basar, tregavne basar lo aminon, and Shmuel had dropped milk from chavis, and he didn't replace it with fish, because fish and meat are both would be considered meat, and we didn't need to have separate entries for them. Meat would be enough for both fish meat and meat. Tani Rabbanan de Rabbi Stad. Ein lokrin yamach machag b'Surya. We don't purchase yamach machag in Surya. Lo yayin, velo morius, velo chalav. That's machag. Velo melach salkundris, velo chiltis, velo gvina, and that's... Wait, the first one was yamach, and the second one is machag. Sounds like exciting times there in Surya. You have to buy it from a mumche, somebody who I guess can be trusted that they are kosher. And all of these things, if you are a guest by a balabais in Surya, I guess Surya was one of the places that David HaMelech captured. I guess, okay, if you go to, I assume it's the house of a Jew is the point. What does Asher say? Does Asher say anything? Yeah, I assume it's talking about a Jew. Balabai is mutter. If you go to the house, if somebody's private domicile, then you can consume these things. Rabbi Yeshua, and this supports Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Shagar lo balabai is leveso mutter. That if a habayis, I believe, ships or sends these items to one's house, they are permitted in Surya. My time will come, because balabais lo shavik eter v'achel isura, because a balabais for himself would only eat things that are permissible. And from what he would send to somebody else would be what he himself would eat, and that would be the kosher stuff, but it seems that they wouldn't have issues selling it to others. But if you go to their house, then it is okay. Okay, that was exciting. Moving on. Umelech salkundris, and salkundris salt. My melech salkundris, what's salkundris salt? Amar Yehuda, Amar Shmuel melech shekol salkundre Romi ochlin osa. It is the salt that all the bakers of Rome, they eat this salt. Melech salkundris shchora asura, that the salkundris salt, if it is black, it is also levana, if it's white, mutaris divrei Reb Meir. That's Reb Meir's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda says fakir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer levana asura, white is also shchora mutaris. The black salkundris salt is permitted. Rabbi Yehuda ben Gamliel mishum Reb Chanina ben Gamliel Omer zovazo asura, says Rabbi Yehuda ben Gamliel, the name of Reb Chanina ben Gamliel, that both salkundris salts are asur. Amar Rav Bechana, Amar Bechana divrei Omer levana asura kirvei dagim levanim tmeim oraven ba. According to the opinion who says that the white salkundris salt is the asur one, it's because the intestines of white fish that are tamei are mixed into it. The divrei Omer shchora asur, according to the opinion who says the black salkundris salt is forbidden. Kirvei dagim shchorim tmeim oraven. But because the intestines of tamei black fish are mixed into it, the divrei Omer zavazo asura, according to the opinion, says both are asura zevaze moravin, but both the intestines of the black fish and the white fish are mixed in, and they're all tamei, and therefore stay away from them. Amar Babo, says Babo mishum Reb Chanina ben Gamliel, zakin echad oy b'shchunasenu, there was an elder ovid kokhavim in our area, shaya machlik poneh b'shuman chazir, that he would put lard on this salt. So yeah, you got to stay away from it. Do I hear the pre-Shabbos music? What is it that I hear? I think so. Shabbos must be getting close to Shabbos, I guess. Okay, but we're almost done. We're also close to the end of the daf, I imagine. Hari'elu asur, yeah, this daf is just kind of like moving, but okay. Hari'elu asurim, so the Mishnah had said, at the end, that reiterated at the end of the Mishnah that these things are asurim ba'achila, but mutarim la'anara. These things, the mute mais, asks the Gemara, these things, to exclude what? Well, the Chizkiah l'mute b'yadua, we saw the opinion of Chizkiah early at the very beginning of today's daf, that when you have the pickles, and you know for sure that in the brine there is wine, so then Chizkiah said that that's also even ba'ano. So meaning the Mishnah said these things are mutar ba'ano to the exclusion of the pickles, according to Chizkiah. The Rabbi Yochanan, according to Rabbi Yochanan, who said that they are mutar ba'ano lemute murias ugvinas beis unyoki v'stomak Reb Meir, it's to the exclusion of murias and gvinas beis unyoki, which are also ba'ano, according to Reb Meir. So this would be a stam mishnah supporting Reb Meir, then based on how we would say according to Rabbi Yochanan. And now we get up to our next mishnah. The elu mutar ba'achila, and the following things of ovday kokhavim are permitted even for consumption. Chalav shechalvo ovid kokhavim v'yisrael ro'eyu, milk that was milked by an ovid kokhavim, and a yid observes him milking. V'advash, as well as honey of an ovid kokhavim. V'adav, this might be just like a separate random halacha here or something. V'adav divanyos af al pi shemenatvin ein boen mishum hechshu mashke. Thank you. That if you have a cluster of grapes and some of the juice of the grapes gets on the outside of the grapes, ein boen mishum hechshu mashke, it would not be machshir I think the point is it would not be machshir the grapes to be makabel tumah, right? Because generally, in order for something right, so let's say dead sheretz touches a cluster of grapes. In order for that cluster of grapes to actually become tamei, at some point those grapes would have had to have come into contact with water since harvest, right? Obviously, when they're growing, they're going to come into contact with water. But since harvest, if they never touched water and then a dead sheretz falls on them, they would never have been muchshir lekabel tumah. So we're saying that if when you are harvesting this cluster of grapes and some of the juice gets on the outside of the grapes, that would not qualify to be machshir them lekabel tumah. Uchvoshin she'ein darkon loses l'sochan yain v'chometz, and pickles that they don't normally put in wine and vinegar. So that would be mutter to eat. It's just pickles. V'tar she'eina trufa, and the small taurus fish that is not all mixed up, and you can actually see the fish and confirm that it's kosher. V'tzir sheyesh badaga, and fish brine that has those. What was the name of that fish that needs to swim around there to prove that it's kosher? I can't remember, but that fish swimming around in the fish brine is there, so it's kosher. The ole shel chiltis, and the leaf of a chiltis, as opposed to the grain of a chiltis. V'zeise gluskos and gulgolin, and I think like olive cakes of sorts. I guess you like press together olives and of some. Anybody know what that is? Rabbi Yosef says, Rabbi Yosef, hashlachin asurin. I think this was olives that azeisim come out of. Yeah, I think this is olives that they're like so soft that the pits are just kind of coming out. Hachagovim aboyin min aslula asurin. The grasshoppers that come from the basket in front of the store of the oved kokhavim are asurin min a heftik mutarin, but from the storage or mutarin v'chein the truma, and similarly for truma, that the deal was that the grasshoppers in the baskets in front of the store owner, he would add wine to them or something. But if he was taking them back from the storage, then no wine had been added from those. So the ones in the baskets are also the one from the storage is mutter. And the Gemara is going to explain what v'chein the truma means. And now for the final segment of our Gemara today. Says the Gemara, Tanina ladetanu rabbanon. Okay, apparently we have a mishnah for that which was taught in a brisa. What does the brisa say? Yoshev Yisrael b'tzad idro shel oved kokhavim. A yid can sit next to the flock of an oved kokhavim. The oved kokhavim cholev lo, and the oved kokhavim can milk an animal and bring the milk to the yid. Umevi lo ve'eno choshesh, and he can bring the milk to the yid, and all good. Echidami, what is the scenario? Ideleka dvar tomi beidro pshito. If the flock is entirely kosher, there's no unkosher animals there, well then obviously the milk is kosher. V'deika dvar tomi beidro, and if there is a tummy animal in the flock, well then amai, why would it be permitted? The olam deika dvar tomi, so it is talking about where there is a tummy animal in the flock, so then why is the milk permitted? It's talking about a scenario where if the yid were to be standing, right, we said that he's sitting there next to the flock, but if he were to be standing, he would be able to supervise and watch the oved kokhavim while he is milking the animal. However, when the yid is sitting, he's unable to see and watch the oved kokhavim milking the animal. But I may have thought, so I may have thought that if the yid is sitting while the oved kokhavim is milking, I may have thought that since the yid is sitting and therefore can't see what the oved kokhavim is doing, maybe we should be concerned that the oved kokhavim is going to mix something into the milk. However, the point is that even though the yid is sitting, but since there is the possibility that if he were to stand up, he would be able to see the oved kokhavim, that is enough of a deterrent that the oved kokhavim will say, I don't want to get busted, I don't want to take the chance that the yid might stand up and see that I'm putting some tummy milk in there. And that is why, so long as the yid is just sitting there with the possibility of being able to simply stand up and observe, that would be enough of a deterrent so that the oved kokhavim, to assume that the milk that the oved kokhavim is milking is from a kosher animal's kosher milk. V'advash, and honey, dvash l'may nichush. What could the concern possibly be about honey? L'may nichush la'im mishum I aruvei. If the concern is, well, maybe the oved kokhavim is going to mix some wine into the honey. But sorry, that would ruin the honey. Why would he mix wine into it? If we're concerned about cooking the honey, nechol k'mo shu chai, as we learned yesterday, that's something that can be eaten uncooked is automatically bishul akum compliant, is automatically bishul akum proof. Bishul akum doesn't apply to it. If the concern is that, well, if it was cooked in a pot, so then of the kokhavim and maybe some flavors of some hog, some pork got into it, but the assumption is that any flavors would have been from yesterday, and therefore it's nosin tam lefgam. Nosin tam lefgam is mutter, and therefore there is no concern about honey. We had said in the mishnah that this cluster of grapes, even though they are dripping with juice, the juice will not be machshir the grapes the kabbatum for a minute. But we have a contradiction at both of the gas, that somebody who is harvesting grapes to trample them and juice them, Shami Omer Hochshir. Shami says that any juice that get on the grapes will be machshir the grapes l'kabel tumo. Hillel Omer Lo Hochshir, whereas Hillel says they won't be machshir the grapes l'kabel tumo. I think the point is that you're harvesting the grapes in order to juice them, but right now you haven't juiced them yet. You're just harvesting them, and some of the juice gets on the outside of the grapes. So Shammai says that it's machshir the grapes l'kabel tumo. Hillel says it is not machshir the grapes l'kabel tumo. V'odu le'Hillel l'Shammai, but in the end Hillel actually agreed with Shammai, and everybody agrees that it would be machshir the grapes. So why is the Mishnah saying that it's not machshir the grapes? Hasam kaboy le'mashke. The answer is that, well, in that case, they were harvesting the grapes in order to juice them, and therefore they wanted the juice. At this point, they wanted, but in the case in our Mishnah, they wanted the grapes for eating, and they didn't want juice to be getting on the outside, so therefore it wasn't machshir the grapes l'kabel tumo chevre. That was the lamed tes of masechta Avodah Zarah. We wrapped up the previous Mishnah that we were learning about things that are asur b'achila but mutter ba'ano, and we went through a whole bunch of them until we got up to the next Mishnah, which listed things that are even mutter ba'achila, and including milk that a yid was supervising and honey, and we are getting started on that. Tomorrow is the final daf of the second parak of masechta Avodah Zarah. I'll see you then. Peace out.